Don't drink that. She's been poisoning you for weeks. The words were barely louder than the clink of crystal, but they landed inside Ethan Whitmore's chest like a dropped key in a silent church. His champagne glass stopped half an inch from his mouth. Around him, the engagement party kept glowing as if nothing had happened. Laughter drifted beneath the chandeliers. A string quartet moved gently through a familiar standard near the wall of glass overlooking the lake. Waiters in black jackets floated between marble columns with silver trays balanced on their palms. The whole room smelled like white roses, candle wax, and money. But Ethan did not move. He turned slowly, not enough to draw attention, just enough to find the source of the voice. Standing beside his chair was a little girl in a navy cardigan and scuffed black shoes, no older than 9. Her brown eyes were steady. Not wide with panic. Not playful. Steady. A paper wristband from the catering entrance circled one thin wrist. She looked like someone who had learned early that if she spoke at the wrong moment, grown-ups would make her disappear. "What did you say?" Ethan asked, his voice low, careful. The girl glanced once at the glass in his hand, then up at the woman standing across the room in ivory silk, smiling for photographs beneath a spray of orchids. Claire Holloway looked radiant under the warm lights, one hand resting at her collarbone, the other touching the diamond Ethan had placed on her finger 3 hours earlier. She was laughing at something his attorney had said, head tilted just right, all grace, all composure. The little girl took a tiny step closer. "I said don't drink it," she whispered. "Please." Ethan stared at her. He had spent 20 years building companies, buying hotels, reading men in boardrooms before they opened their mouths. He knew when someone wanted something from him. This child wanted nothing. No performance. No fear tactic. Just urgency, folded tightly and held still. His fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. The question came out colder than he meant. She nodded. "Yes, sir." "And you still came over here and said that?" Another nod. Behind him, someone called his name. A photographer. A cousin. He could not tell. The room had turned strange around the edges, too bright, too polished. The girl lifted her chin by a fraction. "Because if you drink it, you'll feel sick again tonight," she said. "The same way you did on Tuesday. And last Thursday. And the Sunday after church brunch." Ethan's breath caught so quietly no one but him could have heard it. Those nights existed in a locked drawer of his mind. The metallic taste. The sudden dizziness. The pressure behind his eyes. Claire had blamed stress. His doctor had blamed lack of sleep. Ethan had almost believed them because powerful men are trained to believe their bodies can be overruled. He looked at the girl again, really looked this time. She was black, small for her age, with neat braids pulled back by a fading blue ribbon, and she stood in the middle of a room full of people who had probably never once seen her unless they needed something carried away. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nia Brooks." A burst of laughter rose near the piano. Claire turned then, scanning the room for him, her smile still in place. For 1 second, just one, her eyes flicked to the glass in his hand. Nia saw it. Ethan saw Nia see it. And suddenly the champagne felt heavier than crystal ever should. Claire Holloway began moving toward them with the kind of grace that made people step aside without realizing they had done it. The candles caught on the smooth line of her earrings. The diamond on her hand flashed once, then again, cold and bright. "There you are," she said, smiling at Ethan first, then glancing down at Nia with polite confusion. "I have been looking everywhere for you. Your sister wants one more photo before the cake comes out." Ethan did not answer right away. He lowered the champagne glass slowly, carefully, until the base touched the linen-covered cocktail table beside him. The sound was almost nothing, just crystal meeting cloth, but it seemed louder than the quartet now. Claire's smile held, practiced and perfect. "Everything all right?" she asked. Nia did not move. Ethan could feel the child beside him like a held breath. He looked at Claire and tried, for the first time in months, to separate her face from the version of it he loved. Tonight she wore ivory silk that shimmered softly under the lights, a dress chosen 3 fittings ago after she had laughed and called the others too severe. Ethan remembered that afternoon. The boutique on Madison. The saleswoman with the trembling hands. Claire had been charming then, too. So easy to admire. So effortless in every room. He had once mistaken that ease for safety. "Who is this?" Claire asked, still pleasant. "Nia Brooks," Ethan said. "She had something she wanted to tell me." Claire's eyes dipped to the girl, then returned to Ethan. "Did she?" she said lightly. "Well, I hope it was not wedding advice. We have already had too much of that tonight." A nearby group laughed at some unrelated joke. Glass doors reflected shifting bodies, silver trays, the white blur of flowers. Beyond the windows, the lake behind the estate lay black and still beneath a March sky. Ethan slid one hand into his pocket because he had noticed, suddenly, that it was not steady. Claire noticed that, too. He saw the flicker in her gaze. Small. Quick. Gone. "Actually," Ethan said, "she mentioned I have been feeling under the weather." Claire let out a soft breath that could have been concern or amusement. "You have been doing too much. I told you that." She was specific. Children usually are. Claire tilted her head and looked at Nia again, not unkindly, but with a brightness that did not reach her eyes. "Sweetheart, where is your parent? You should not be wandering around the main floor alone." Nia's fingers curled against the hem of her cardigan, but her voice stayed quiet and even. "I came with my grandma. She is helping in the kitchen." Claire smiled as if that settled everything. "There we go." Ethan did not miss the shift in her tone, the way Nia had been turned from a person into background in a single sentence. It happened all the time in rooms like this. Staff blurred into fixtures. Children of staff blurred into air. He had never thought about it until now, and that realization shamed him more than he wanted to admit. "Nia," he said, keeping his eyes on Claire, "tell me again what you saw." Claire's posture changed so slightly another man would have missed it. Her shoulders did not stiffen. Her expression did not crack. But one hand moved to the chain at her neck, touching it once, then dropping. "Ethan," she said softly this time, "maybe this is not the moment." "Tell me," he repeated. Nia swallowed. The orchestra shifted into another song. Somewhere behind them, kitchen doors opened, releasing a brief ribbon of roasted garlic and butter into the sweet air of champagne and roses. "I saw her switch your glass," Nia said. "By the orchids. When the photographer asked you to turn toward the window." Ethan's chest tightened. He remembered the moment. The flash. The laughter. Claire stepping close to straighten his lapel. "And?" he asked. Nia looked at the untouched glass on the table. "And she kept holding the other one for a second too long," the girl whispered. "Like she wanted to make sure you took the right one." Claire did not blink. That was what Ethan noticed first. Not outrage. Not confusion. Not even the faint offended laugh most innocent people reach for when accused of something absurd by a child in the middle of an engagement party. Just stillness. Smooth and polished and careful. Then, slowly, she smiled again, but this time it looked arranged, like a flower placed in a vase after the guests had already arrived. "That is a very serious thing to say," she murmured, her voice warm enough for anyone nearby to mistake it for kindness. "Nia, is it? I think you may have misunderstood what you saw." Nia lowered her eyes for half a second, then lifted them again. Ethan saw the fear there now, finally, but it did not move her feet. "I did not misunderstand." Claire gave a soft laugh through her nose and turned to Ethan as if asking him to join her in humoring a child. "She is little. She probably saw me fixing your cuff or moving your glass away from the table edge. You know how crowded it is in here." Ethan said nothing. The quartet was playing something slower now, and beyond the strings he could hear the small mechanics of the room, an ice scoop hitting metal, heels tapping stone, the muted opening and closing of service doors near the back hall. Ordinary sounds. But his body no longer trusted ordinary things. He looked down at the glass. Pale gold bubbles still climbed the inside like nothing in the world had changed. Then he looked at Claire's hand. She was wearing the engagement ring, but she was also wearing the thin platinum band she always twisted when she wanted to look calm. He had seen her do it during depositions, during charity galas, during one ugly zoning fight in Palm Beach when a city councilman kept her waiting for 90 minutes. She was twisting it now. Once. Twice. Tiny circles. "What else did you see?" Ethan asked, still addressing Nia. Claire's head turned toward him, not fast, but fast enough. "Ethan." "What else?" he repeated. Nia looked at Claire, then back at the table, then at Ethan. Her voice was even smaller this time, but somehow clearer. She had something in her hand. A little tube or bottle. White. Not bigger than my thumb. Claire's smile disappeared for the first time. It did not collapse. It simply left. "This is ridiculous," she said quietly. "You are going to let a child derail our night because she thinks she saw a vitamin case?" Vitamin case. Ethan felt the word settle into place with a cold little click. Claire had supplied an explanation before he had asked for one. Before Nia had described shape, cap, label, or where it came from. "I did not say vitamin case," Nia whispered. Claire's jaw tightened so briefly it might have been imagined. But Ethan did not imagine it. Not now. The room had begun to bend around details. He noticed everything. The faint line between Claire's brows. The shine of perspiration near the stem of her left earring. The way she angled her body slightly, almost unconsciously, blocking the view of her satin clutch resting on the table behind her. "Enough," Claire said, turning fully toward Ethan. Her voice stayed low, but the softness had gone out of it. "This is exactly the kind of moment people wait for. One strange interruption, one rumor, and suddenly our entire family event becomes a circus. Please do not feed it." Ethan stared at her. Feed it. Circus. Strange interruption. That was how people talked when they wanted truth to sound embarrassing before it had the chance to sound real. Across the room, his sister Lydia lifted a hand to him, signaling for the cake ceremony in another minute or two. He did not return the gesture. "Nia," he said, "where were you standing?" "By the orchids," she replied immediately. "The big ones in the silver bowl. I was helping my grandma carry folded napkins from the service hall. The photographer told everybody to look toward the lake. You laughed. She touched your arm. Then she switched the glasses." Ethan could see it now in fragments, the flashbulb reflecting off glass, Claire stepping in close, the smell of her perfume, clean and expensive with something floral underneath, her fingers brushing his sleeve, her voice in his ear asking him to smile like he meant it. He had not looked at the tray after that. Why would he? Why would any man look for danger in the hand he planned to marry? Nia swallowed and added one last thing, so soft Ethan almost missed it. "And after she did it, she put the little white thing in her bag. The one behind her." Ethan's gaze lifted to the satin clutch on the table. Claire moved her hand toward it at once, too quick to be casual, too late to be invisible. And in that tiny motion, smaller than a breath, the polished floor beneath Ethan's life began to crack. Claire's fingers stopped 1 inch from the satin clutch. Not because she meant to stop. Because Ethan had already seen enough. The room around them still shimmered with wealth and ceremony, all candlelight and polished marble and soft music, but something had shifted beneath it now, something thin and sharp as cracked ice under fresh snow. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a scene. That alone made Claire pause. Men like Ethan Whitmore were expected to command a room when crossed. The fact that he stayed quiet was more unsettling than anger would have been. "Leave the bag where it is," he said. Claire let out a faint breath, almost a laugh, as if the request itself were too absurd to dignify. "Ethan, listen to yourself. Leave it there." The words came out calm, level, final. For the first time that evening, too nearby. Guests went silent. A woman in silver turned her head. One of the servers slowed by the champagne tower, then quickly looked away. Claire sensed it immediately. Her smile returned, but this time it carried a crack down the center. "You are really doing this?" she asked. "At our engagement party? Because a little girl said she saw a bottle? Because she saw details you did not know she saw?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. Ethan reached for the glass again, not to drink, just to hold it up between two fingers and study the pale gold under the chandelier light. Tiny bubbles rose in perfect lines. Beautiful things were often the easiest to trust. That thought came to him so cold and clear it almost hurt. "You have been telling me for weeks that I am exhausted," he said. "That I need less caffeine. Fewer meetings. More sleep." Claire folded her arms. "Because you do. And every time I got sick, it was after dinner. Usually after you handed me something yourself. That is called taking care of someone. Is it?" Nia stood very still beside the cocktail table, her small hands tucked close to her body now, as if she were trying to take up less space. Ethan noticed how carefully she watched Claire, not with childish curiosity but with the quiet attention of someone who had learned that grown-ups revealed themselves most clearly in the half-second before they answered. The string quartet drifted into another song, soft and elegant and completely wrong for the feeling gathering under Ethan's ribs. Across the room, his sister had stopped smiling for the photographer. Lydia was watching now, one hand frozen near the cake knife, uncertainty clouding her face. Claire followed Ethan's line of sight and lowered her voice further. "People are looking. Then smile," he said. "You are good at that." The words landed harder than he intended. He saw it in the way her chin lifted, in the way her shoulders squared beneath the silk. Claire Holloway had built a life on never appearing rattled, never giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "You are tired," she said, each word trimmed and measured. "And that child is scared and confused. If she thinks she saw something unusual, then I am sure there is an innocent explanation." Nia spoke before Ethan could answer. "Then open the bag." Claire looked down at her slowly, and this time the warmth was gone completely. There was nothing dramatic in her expression, nothing loud, but the coolness in it changed the air. It was the look of a woman no longer pretending a child mattered. Ethan felt a small, bitter shame rise in him. How many times had he stood in rooms like this and failed to notice who was being dismissed? Nia was 9 years old, black, small, dressed in a cardigan that had been washed enough times for the fabric to soften at the cuffs, and she had somehow shown more courage in the last 2 minutes than half the men on his board ever had. "No," Claire said. "I am not going to empty my personal bag in front of guests because a child wants attention." Ethan set the champagne glass back on the linen with deliberate care and turned slightly toward the older woman standing near the service hall entrance. Mrs. Evelyn Price had worked for his family for 26 years, long enough to know when his tone changed from social to serious. Their eyes met. She did not ask questions. She simply straightened. "Mrs. Price," Ethan said, still watching Claire, "would you stay with Miss Brooks for a moment?" Evelyn crossed the floor at once, quiet as winter. Claire took a step back. "Ethan." "And ask Dr. Mercer if he is still here," Ethan added. "Tell him I need a private word. Now." The color shifted in Claire's face so faintly another man might have missed it. But Ethan saw it. And so did Nia. For the first time that night, Claire Holloway looked not offended, not embarrassed, but afraid. Dr. Alan Mercer arrived without hurry, but Ethan knew him well enough to read the speed hidden beneath the stillness. Mercer was in his late 60s, silver-haired, exact, the kind of physician who never wasted movement or language. He stepped in from the edge of the ballroom carrying a folded napkin in one hand and a look of polite concern already settled on his face. "You asked for me?" he said quietly. Ethan nodded toward the untouched champagne glass. "I need this tested." Discreetly. "Right now." Mercer looked at the glass, then at Ethan, then at Claire. His expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Tested for what? Ethan could feel Claire watching him with a focus so intense it seemed to cool the air. "Anything that should not be there," he said. Claire gave a soft, incredulous laugh. Alan, please tell me this is not serious. We are about to cut a cake and suddenly Ethan is acting like we are in some courthouse drama because a child wandered into a conversation. Mercer did not touch the glass yet. He studied Ethan a moment longer. Men who had known him 20 years had learned the difference between Whitmore the host and Whitmore the man who had already made up his mind. All right, Mercer said at last. He drew a clean linen handkerchief from his pocket, wrapped it around the stem, and lifted the glass as carefully as if it contained evidence instead of champagne. The bubbles trembled in the candlelight. I will need 10 to 15 minutes for a preliminary check in the downstairs powder room. I can at least tell you if there is anything obvious. Claire stared at him. You cannot be serious. Very, Ethan said. Mercer gave a small nod and turned away. Mrs. Evelyn Price was already beside Nia, one hand resting lightly at the center of the girl's back, not steering her, simply anchoring her. Ethan had seen Evelyn calm guests, children, grieving widowers, and one panicked senator in his time. She had a gift for making people feel protected without being fussed over. Nia looked up at Ethan as Mercer disappeared toward the back hall. I can show you where I was standing, she said. Claire exhaled sharply. No. Absolutely not. This has gone far enough. Ethan turned to her. Then help me understand it. I do not have to prove innocence to a child. No, he said, his voice low. But you may have to explain coincidence. Claire folded her arms tighter. The silk at her shoulders caught the light like frost. Around them, the party had not stopped, not exactly, but it had thinned in spirit. Conversation stumbled and restarted. Guests pretended not to stare and failed. Two violinists kept playing with disciplined smiles, though even they looked uneasy now. Somewhere from the terrace side, a gust pressed rain against the tall glass panes, soft at first, then steadier, like fingertips tapping to be let in. I saw it from the orchids, Nia said again, quieter this time, speaking mostly to Ethan. And before that I saw her by the bar. Claire's head turned sharply. By the bar? Ethan asked. Nia nodded. She asked the man in the white jacket for sparkling water, but she already had some. Then when he turned around, she opened her bag and put something in her hand. Ethan felt something cold unwind through him. What kind of something? Nia pressed her lips together, remembering. A little white tube. Maybe medicine. Maybe powder. I do not know. But she looked around first. Claire stepped forward, anger finally breaking through the polish. That is enough. Ethan, this is absurd. She is a little girl telling a story because she wants to feel important for one night. Do you honestly not see that? The words landed hard, not because they were loud, but because of how easily they came. Nia's eyes dropped to the floor for the first time. Ethan saw it, and something inside him shifted again, deeper now. He had heard powerful people dismiss weaker ones all his life. He had probably done it himself, cleaner than this, dressed up as efficiency or reason. But hearing it turned on a 9-year-old child in a borrowed cardigan made it sound exactly like what it was. Evelyn drew Nia half a step closer. Ethan held Claire's gaze. She did not ask for anything, he said. Not attention. Not money. Not rescue. She asked me not to drink. Claire opened her mouth, but the words never came. Because at that moment Dr. Mercer reappeared at the far end of the ballroom, moving faster than before, the wrapped champagne glass still in his hand, and whatever calm had been on his face was gone. Dr. Mercer did not slow down until he was close enough that Ethan could see the fine tremor in the hand holding the wrapped glass. That alone said more than words should have needed to. Alan Mercer was not a man who startled easily. He had delivered bad news in hospital corridors, in penthouse libraries, on private tarmacs with engines still running behind him. He believed in facts, in blood panels, in measured tone, in never giving fear a theatrical entrance. But now the color had thinned from his face, and when he stopped beside Ethan, the air between them felt colder than the rain pressing softly against the windows. We need privacy, Mercer said. Claire stepped forward at once. No. Whatever this is, you can say it here. Mercer's eyes shifted to her, then back to Ethan. Not here. Ethan looked around the ballroom. The cake table stood ready beneath its sugar flowers. His sister's smile was gone completely now. Guests hovered in little islands of uncertainty, pretending to sip drinks they had forgotten to taste. Somewhere near the back wall, a server set down a tray too quickly, and the silver made a sharp sound against the linen. It carried farther than it should have. Ethan felt the whole room holding itself still. Library, he said. Claire drew in a breath. Ethan, this is becoming insane. Library, he repeated. Mrs. Price nodded once and guided Nia with her, not through the center of the room but along the edge, past the mirrored console and the long row of framed black and white photographs from Ethan's family foundation dinners. Ethan noticed, absurdly, the reflection of their small procession in the glass. Himself in a midnight tuxedo. Claire in ivory silk. Mercer with a wrapped champagne flute. Evelyn steady and watchful. And Nia, 9 years old, her braids tied back with a faded blue ribbon, walking into a billionaire's library because she had whispered the truth no one else had wanted to hear. The doors closed behind them with a muted click. The library smelled of leather, cedar, and old paper warmed by hidden vents. Rain traced the tall windows overlooking the back lawn in silver threads. Ethan did not sit. Neither did Claire. Mercer placed the glass on the green blotter atop Ethan's desk and removed the handkerchief with deliberate care. This is preliminary, he said. I used a rapid tox screening strip from my emergency kit. It is not full lab confirmation, but it is enough to tell me the liquid contains something it should not contain. Claire stared at him. What does that even mean? Mercer kept his tone level. It means there appears to be a non-prescribed sedative compound in the champagne. Low dose. Not enough to create an immediate medical crisis in a healthy adult from a single sip, but enough to impair, especially if repeated over time. Silence fell so completely Ethan could hear the rain ticking the window glass. For one long second, the words did not land. They hovered. Abstract. Clinical. Then his own body began translating them for him. The late-night nausea. The metallic taste in the back of his throat. The headaches that had felt like a belt tightening behind his eyes. The exhaustion that clung even after 10 hours in bed. The strange heaviness in his limbs after dinners he could barely remember finishing. His fingers pressed against the edge of the desk. The wood felt suddenly far away. Repeated over time? He asked, and his voice no longer sounded like his. Mercer nodded once. That would fit the pattern you described to me 3 days ago. Episodic symptoms. Increasing fatigue. Brain fog. Elevated pulse followed by sudden weakness. I told you then it could be stress or overwork because those are common explanations. I was wrong to stop there. Claire laughed then, a short brittle sound with no warmth in it at all. This is unbelievable. A screening strip? In a powder room? That is your science? Mercer turned to her fully. My science is why I am not speculating. I am telling him only what I can responsibly say from the result in front of me. Something is in that glass. Claire crossed her arms. Or the glass was contaminated by the bar. Then we test the bottle. Ethan spoke before Mercer could answer. The idea entered his mind fully formed, cold, and precise. We test the bottle, the tray, every open glass near the orchids. Claire's eyes flashed. You are turning your own engagement party into a crime scene because of a field test and a child with an imagination. Nia, who had been standing near the fireplace with Evelyn's hand resting lightly on her shoulder, lifted her face. She had not spoken since entering the room. Now she did, very softly. I do not have an imagination like that. The quiet dignity in her voice cut through the room more cleanly than shouting would have. Ethan looked at her, and what he saw there broke something open in him, not fear this time, but shame. She was a little girl. A black child who had entered a house that was not built for her, crossed a room that did not see her, and risked not being believed by people richer, older, louder, and whiter than she was. And she had still told the truth. Claire noticed where his eyes had gone. "Do not do this," she said, and now for the first time her voice carried something beneath anger, something rawer. "Do not let her poison your mind against me." Ethan turned back to her slowly. The irony landed so hard it almost made him dizzy. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far across the lake, low and distant. Inside the library, no one moved. Then Ethan reached for the phone on his desk and said the one thing Claire Holloway had clearly never believed he would say to anyone about her. "Call security. No one leaves the estate." The words seemed to strip the oxygen out of the room. Claire stared at Ethan as if he had spoken in a language she did not recognize, something foreign and beneath reply. Then the disbelief left her face and something colder took its place. "You are not doing that," she said. Ethan lifted the desk phone anyway. His thumb had just touched the line when Claire moved, not with panic, but with decision. She reached for her satin clutch from the edge of the desk where she had set it down the moment they entered the library. Ethan saw it happen a fraction too late. The bag disappeared behind her hip. "Put it back," he said. Claire did not. "You have lost perspective," she replied, her voice suddenly flat, almost tired. "You are exhausted, embarrassed, and surrounded by people who are feeding your worst instincts." Ethan kept his hand on the phone. "Open the bag." "No. Then it goes to security unopened." Claire laughed again, but this time the sound cracked on the way out. "You would hand my personal things to hired guards because a 9-year-old from the kitchen made up a story?" Nia flinched at the words kitchen, just slightly, but Ethan saw it. He saw the way she tucked her hands deeper into the sleeves of her cardigan, the way she made herself smaller without moving an inch. Mrs. Price saw it too. Evelyn's expression changed so subtly it might have escaped anyone else, but Ethan knew that look. It was the look she wore when someone had crossed a line in his house and would never be invited to cross it again. Dr. Mercer stepped between Ethan and Claire by half a pace, not protective, not aggressive, simply making the room narrower. "Miss Holloway," he said, "if there is an innocent explanation, the fastest path to it is cooperation." Claire's eyes flashed toward him. "Do not patronize me, Alan. I am not." Rain slid down the library windows in silver streaks. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the closed doors, the quartet had finally stopped playing. The silence from the ballroom felt different now, heavier, as if the party itself had become aware that it was standing over a trapdoor. Ethan pressed the desk line and spoke to the operator downstairs in a voice so controlled it frightened even him. "This is Mr. Whitmore. I want discreet perimeter hold. No vehicles moved, no staff dismissed, no guests allowed beyond the front drive until I say otherwise." Quietly. He listened, gave one short yes, then hung up. Claire watched him with parted lips. "Perimeter hold," she repeated. "For me. For everyone," Ethan said. "Until I know what has been happening under my roof." Claire looked toward the door as though calculating distance, not to flee exactly, but to regain position, to get back into a room where appearances could still be weaponized in her favor. Ethan knew that instinct. He had built empires on reading it in other people. "Nobody is accusing you publicly," he said. "Not yet. Not yet." She repeated the words slowly, tasting the insult in them. "Do you hear yourself? I hear a man who should have listened to his own body sooner." That landed. Claire's face shifted, and for the first time Ethan saw something more dangerous than anger in her. He saw contempt, old and buried, rising through the polished surface. "Your body," she said softly. "Your body has been failing you for months. You cannot remember simple things. You cancel meetings and call it strategy. You wake up sweating and tell yourself it is pressure. If I had wanted to manipulate you, Ethan, I would not need chemistry. I would only need patience." The room went still. Nia's eyes widened. Mercer did not speak. Evelyn drew the child closer by an inch. Ethan looked at Claire as though seeing architecture after the wallpaper had been stripped away. The cruelty in the sentence was too specific, too practiced, to have been born in one moment of frustration. It had lived somewhere inside her already. That was a mistake, Claire said immediately, as if she heard it too late herself. But the softness did not return. I did not mean it that way. Ethan reached for the small brass box on his desk where he kept cufflinks, old watch parts, and spare keys. From it, he removed the master keycard that opened every interior drawer and cabinet in the east wing of the house, including the private dressing suite Claire had used all week. He set it on the blotter between them with a quiet metallic click. "Mrs. Price," he said without taking his eyes off Claire, "please take Miss Brooks to the blue sitting room and stay with her. No one speaks to her unless you are present." Then he picked up the keycard again and looked at Dr. Mercer. "You are coming with me. I want to see what else is in her room before she remembers to be afraid of that too." The hallway outside Claire's dressing suite felt colder than the rest of the house, though the heat was running and the lamps along the paneled walls burned with their usual amber glow. Ethan moved quickly, Dr. Mercer one step behind him, the master keycard warm in his palm from how tightly he had been holding it. Every sound in the corridor came back too clearly, the soft strike of his shoes on hardwood, the low hum of the climate vents, the faint throb of party music still leaking up from the floor below like something trying to pretend the night had not broken open. Claire followed at first, then stopped near the turn in the hall when she realized Ethan was not slowing down. "You cannot search my room without me," she said. Her voice carried cleanly down the corridor, sharpened now, stripped of the sweetness she wore in public. Ethan stopped at the door but did not turn around. "Watch me," he said, and slid the keycard through the panel. The lock clicked green. For a second nobody moved. Then Ethan opened the door. Claire's suite was immaculate, almost unnaturally so. Lamps glowed low beside the upholstered bed. A garment bag hung from the wardrobe handle. A silver hairbrush rested on the vanity beside a crystal perfume bottle, and a neat row of cosmetics arranged as if a magazine crew had styled them minutes earlier. The room smelled faintly of gardenia and pressed linen. Beautiful. Controlled. Untouched. Ethan had once found that precision soothing. Tonight it felt staged. "This is insane," Claire said from the doorway. "You are humiliating me over nothing." Ethan stepped inside anyway. He moved first to the vanity, opening drawers one by one with careful hands. Brushes. Powder compacts. A velvet jewelry roll. Travel-size hand cream. Mercer went to the side table near the window, examining the water carafe, the glasses, the silver tray set there earlier by staff. Rain slid down the dark window panes in thin silver lines, turning the lights from the driveway below into blurred streaks. Ethan opened the wardrobe. Dresses in soft neutrals. Shoe boxes stacked with tissue paper folded precisely. A locked leather case at the bottom shelf. He looked back at Claire. "Open it." She folded her arms. "No." Ethan crouched, keyed the small latch with the master card override, and lifted the lid. Inside were cosmetics at first glance. A silk pouch. A travel steamer. A charger. Then beneath the pouch, tucked flat under a folded cashmere wrap, sat a white cylindrical tube no larger than a thumb. Nia had gotten the size exactly right. Ethan did not touch it immediately. The sight of it pulled the breath from his chest more effectively than any accusation had. Mercer came to his side, knelt, and looked in. His expression hardened with the quiet certainty of a man who had just found the thing he already feared existed. "Do not touch it with bare hands," he said. Ethan stood without speaking. Claire did not move from the doorway. "It is melatonin," she said at once. "I have not been sleeping. You know that." Ethan looked at her. "Then why was it hidden under cashmere in a locked case?" Claire's eyes flashed. "Because not everything in my life belongs to your staff." Mercer used a handkerchief to lift the tube gently into the light. There was no retail label, no prescription sticker, no branding at all. Just a blank white container with a twist cap. "That is not commercial packaging," Mercer said quietly. He turned at once, studying the seam. "And melatonin does not usually come prepared like this." Claire took one step into the room. "Usually?" So even now you are guessing. Ethan moved to the nightstand and opened the drawer. Inside lay a leather-bound planner, 2 lipstick cases, and a pharmacy receipt folded twice. His fingers stilled on it. The receipt was dated 12 days earlier. The name on the order was not Claire Holloway. It was C. Hartwell. Paid cash. Compounded sleep support capsules. Ethan read it once, then again. Claire saw the paper in his hand, and something in her face changed too fast to hide. It was gone in a blink, but it was enough. Who is C. Hartwell? Ethan asked. Claire said nothing. The silence in the room deepened until even the rain seemed to pause against the glass. Mercer unscrewed the cap of the white tube just enough to look inside without fully handling the contents. Fine pale powder rested within, almost weightless, almost innocent. He replaced the cap and rose slowly to his feet. This is not a vitamin, he said. Ethan looked from the tube to the receipt to Claire standing framed in the doorway in ivory silk, her engagement ring catching lamplight that now looked colder than metal. Then his eyes dropped to the planner in the drawer. A corner of paper protruded from between 2 pages, as though jammed there in haste. He pulled it free. It was a note in Claire's handwriting, quick and slanted, written on hotel stationery from a lunch meeting downtown. Just 6 words. After the wedding, everything transfers clean. Ethan did not feel anger first. He felt recognition. Like a lock inside his own memory turning at last. Claire saw him read it, and for the first time that night she stopped pretending there had been some misunderstanding. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. Ethan, give me that. Claire took 1 step forward, then stopped when Ethan did not move. The note remained in his hand, small and almost weightless, yet it seemed to change the whole temperature of the room. After the wedding, everything transfers clean. 6 words. No signature. No explanation. Just a sentence written by someone who believed the future was already hers. Rain kept feathering down the tall windows behind her, soft and steady, turning the driveway lights into pale streaks against the glass. Dr. Mercer stood beside the open leather case, the unlabeled tube wrapped carefully in his handkerchief now, his expression unreadable except for the tightness at the corners of his mouth. Ethan looked at Claire for a long moment and saw, not the woman from the photographs downstairs, not the woman who knew which wine his investors preferred or how to charm a room before dessert, but someone standing in a doorway calculating what still might be salvaged. Who is C. Hartwell? He asked again. Claire's throat moved once. It is nothing. Then answer me. A billing name. Her voice came out flat, too quick. Sometimes I use different names for privacy. Ethan held up the pharmacy receipt. For compounded capsules? For sleep support. With cash. Claire folded her arms, but the gesture had lost its elegance now. It looked like armor. You are rich enough to know that privacy is often bought in odd ways. Ethan almost laughed, but there was no room in him for it. He set the note on the vanity beside the crystal perfume bottle and looked down at the planner still open in the drawer. Several pages had colored tabs along the edge. He pulled one free. A wedding seating chart. Another tab marked a list of honeymoon logistics. Another held notes for a foundation speech Claire had planned to give as Mrs. Whitmore. Then he reached the page for next Friday. At 2:15 in the afternoon, written in the same slanted hand, were 4 words that made his chest go cold all over again. Sign amended trust packet. Ethan stared at them. His trust packet had been finalized 6 months ago. No amended version was scheduled. No family office review. No board notice. Nothing. Alan, he said quietly, without looking up. If someone wanted repeated low-dose sedation, not enough to send a man to the hospital, just enough to blur judgment, we can focus, maybe make him easier to pressure into signing documents. Would that fit? Mercer did not answer immediately. He chose his words with brutal care. It would fit better than coincidence. Claire turned to him sharply. You have no right. No, Mercer said, still calm. You lost the right to complain about fairness when an unlabeled compound turned up in your locked case. Ethan kept turning pages. Beneath the trust note were initials. RK followed by a Midtown address and a time. Beneath that, another line. Confirm board vote if needed. He looked up slowly. Claire had gone very still again, but it was a different stillness now. Not controlled. Cornered. Who is RK? Ethan asked. Claire said nothing. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. Ethan closed the planner with more care than anger required and set it on the vanity. You were not making me sick just to leave me tired, he said. You were making me less sharp. Claire's eyes flashed with something like defiance, then dimmed under the weight of the evidence around them. You do not know what you are talking about. Then explain the trust packet. It was a note. Explain the initials. Business. Explain the powder. Claire's breath shivered on the way out. For 1 second, Ethan thought she might finally tell the truth. Instead, she looked away, toward the rain, toward the dark lawn beyond the glass. You are not easy to build a life with, she said quietly. Do you know that? Every room becomes yours. Every choice bends around your name, your money, your instincts. People adapt or they disappear. Ethan felt the words strike somewhere older than anger. So you decided to adapt me. Claire looked back at him then, and whatever tenderness he had once imagined in her was gone. I decided not to disappear. Mercer stood very still, the handkerchief-wrapped tube held away from his body. Outside in the hall, footsteps passed, then faded. Somewhere downstairs a door opened and shut, and the party that had once been an engagement celebration now sounded like a house waiting for bad news to choose its shape. Ethan took the planner, the receipt, and the handwritten note, and handed them to Mercer. Catalog all of it, he said. Then he turned toward the door. I want the security footage from the bar, the orchids, and the north hallway tonight. And I want records from every pharmacy delivery made to this house in the last 60 days. Claire's voice followed him, softer now, but more dangerous for it. If you do that, you are not just exposing me. Ethan stopped with his hand on the doorframe. What does that mean? Claire did not answer right away. She looked past him, toward the staircase landing beyond the hall, toward the lower floor where the blue sitting room waited with one brave little girl inside it. When she finally spoke, her voice had thinned almost to a whisper. It means I was never the only one watching you. The words followed Ethan into the hallway like a draft under a locked door. I was never the only one watching you. He stopped at the landing and turned back slowly, the brass keycard still warm in his hand, Dr. Mercer just behind him with the planner, the note, the receipt, and the white tube wrapped like something infectious. Claire remained in the doorway of her suite, framed by lamplight and rain shadow, one hand braced lightly against the trim as though the house itself had shifted under her feet. Who else? Ethan asked. Downstairs, the party had thinned into a low, unsettled murmur. No music now. No bright rise of laughter. Just the faint sound of too many wealthy people speaking softly because they did not yet know how bad the story was. Claire looked at him for a long moment, and when she finally answered, the sharpness had gone out of her voice. What remained was something more dangerous because it sounded almost tired. If I tell you now, I lose whatever is left of my leverage. Ethan stared at her, and that word landed harder than all the others. Leverage. Not love. Not fear. Not panic. Leverage. He let the silence sit between them until it became unbearable. There is no leverage left, he said. Claire gave the smallest shake of her head. You still think this is about me and a bottle and a wedding? Then correct me. She looked past him down the stairs again, toward the lower floor where the blue sitting room waited behind closed doors. That little girl did not just interrupt the party, Claire said. She interrupted timing. Ethan felt something narrow and cold pass through his chest. Timing for what? Claire did not answer. Instead, she asked, Do you remember the dinner in Greenwich 6 weeks ago? The one with Roland Kessler and the Harbor Crest board? Ethan remembered it in pieces. A private dining room. Too much red wine on the table. A headache blooming halfway through the second course. Claire insisting he push through because the vote mattered. Roland Kessler laughing too loudly at things that were not funny. Ethan leaving before dessert, and waking the next morning unable to recall whether he had approved the revised land package or tabled it. At the time he had blamed fatigue. Then another memory rose behind it. Palm Beach, 3 weeks later. A breakfast meeting with outside counsel. Coffee that tasted faintly metallic. Hands unsteady over a legal pad. Claire touching his wrist and saying he looked pale. "RK," Ethan said quietly. "Roland Kessler." Claire said nothing, but she did not need to. Dr. Mercer drew in a slow breath beside him. "Board leverage," Mercer murmured. "If a chairman appears unstable, governance shifts." Ethan turned that over in his mind and felt the pattern begin to close. Roland Kessler had spent a year circling Whitmore Capital's real estate arm, pushing for a restructuring Ethan never trusted. He wanted asset access, discretionary signature authority, and control over a trust-managed pipeline Ethan had kept locked down after his father's death. Too aggressive. Too eager. Ethan had resisted him every time. Or thought he had. "You were softening me up," Ethan said, more to himself than to Claire. "Not to kill me. To cloud me." Claire's face changed, not with remorse, but with the strain of no longer being able to keep pace with the unraveling. "It was never supposed to become permanent," she said. "That is what they told me." Ethan felt the house go very still around him. Rain ticked the tall hallway windows. Somewhere below, a grandfather clock marked the quarter hour with a muted chime that sounded impossibly domestic for a night like this. "They," he repeated. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them again. "Roland. And one other person." "Who?" "Someone inside your own structure." Ethan took a step back into the room without fully meaning to. Dr. Mercer remained at his shoulder, quiet and alert. "My family office?" Claire hesitated. "Not exactly." "My board?" "Close." "Then who?" Claire's gaze dropped to the planner Mercer held under his arm. "The doctor who used to review your executive health summaries before Alan took over full-time." Mercer went still. Ethan looked sharply at him. "Harold Baines?" Mercer nodded once, grimly. "Baines still receives summary access on legacy files unless revoked. He also consults governance risk for 2 boards in the city, including Harborcrest." Ethan remembered Baines now with unpleasant clarity. Smooth, expensive, always reassuring in that polished way some doctors used when they were really speaking to men with money rather than patients with bodies. He had retired from direct care 8 months earlier, but not fully, not the way Ethan had assumed. A faint dizziness touched Ethan then, not chemical this time, but the sick physical sensation of watching trusted structures reveal rot from the inside. Claire saw it happen. "Sit down," she said reflexively, and the irony of her concern was almost obscene. Ethan did not sit. "How long?" he asked. "The first dinner was in January." January. He counted backward. That was before the engagement announcement. Before the Palm Beach retreat. Before the first time he woke in the middle of the night with his pulse skidding and his mouth tasting like pennies. Before Claire had started speaking more often about legacy planning and marital simplification, and how exhausting it must be to carry so much alone. The memory of her voice on those nights now made his skin feel cold. "What was your part?" he asked. Claire's answer came after a long pause. "Access," she said. "That was all at first. Access to your schedule. Access to what you ate. Access to when you were tired enough not to notice one more supplement, one more pour, one more signed page put in front of you after 11 o'clock. Ethan's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. "And the engagement?" Claire looked at him as though the question itself were naive. It made proximity look romantic. The sentence did not echo. It simply settled. Mercer looked away for the first time all night. Ethan could feel the blood beating hard at the base of his throat. Yet beneath the fury, Beneath the humiliation, beneath the deep cold disgust rising through him, another image kept returning with unnatural clarity. A little black girl standing beside a champagne glass, scuffed shoes on polished stone, telling the truth into a room built not to hear her. That truth had done in 10 seconds what all of Ethan's money, lawyers, advisors, and polished systems had failed to do for months. It had saved him before he signed something he could not undo. He turned to Mercer. I want every electronic access log pulled from January 1st. Gate entries, pharmacy deliveries, guest manifests, camera archives, catering records, wellness invoices, everything. Mercer nodded at once. Ethan looked back at Claire. And you are going to tell me the other name. Claire's mouth parted then closed. Whatever calculation she had been making all night seemed finally to collapse under the weight of what could no longer be hidden. She leaned against the doorway, eyes glistening now, though Ethan no longer trusted tears any more than he trusted Crystal. It was Lydia. She whispered. For a second Ethan did not understand the sound he had heard. It was shaped like language, but his mind refused to let it mean what it meant. Lydia. His sister. Downstairs beside the cake table. His father's daughter. The one who had been signaling for him to smile while a child tried to stop him from drinking. Rain struck the glass harder suddenly, as if the whole night had leaned in at once. Mercer swore under his breath, barely audible. Ethan did not move. He did not speak. He only stood there in the hallway light, feeling the old house hold its breath around him, while somewhere below on the main floor the guests of his engagement party waited politely in silk and black tie, not yet knowing the family at the center of the room had already begun to collapse. Lydia Whitmore was standing exactly where Ethan had last seen her, near the cake table beneath the sugar flowers, one hand resting lightly on the silver handle of the knife as if she were still waiting for him to rejoin the evening she thought she understood. From the top of the staircase, she looked almost untouched by the night so far. Her black silk gown fell clean and narrow to the floor. Her hair, pinned low at the nape, had not loosened. Her expression was composed in that old family way that had once made Ethan feel steadier simply by being near her. For one impossible second, he hated Claire for saying the name. For a second after that, he hated himself for instantly knowing it could be true. He descended the stairs without rushing. Dr. Mercer stayed behind him with the evidence gathered close, and somewhere farther back security had begun to move into place along the hallways with the quiet efficiency of men trained never to interrupt the rich unless summoned by disaster. The ballroom had thinned into clusters of watchful silence. Guests held glasses they no longer drank from. Candles still flickered on mirrored trays. The orchids by the north bar still breathed their pale, expensive sweetness into the room as if beauty could outlast deceit. Lydia saw Ethan coming and smiled at first, the smile of an older sister trying to rescue a ceremony from awkward delay. Then she saw his face. The smile vanished before it fully formed. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan stopped a few feet from her. Around them, conversations quieted by instinct. Claire had not followed them downstairs, and that absence seemed to widen the room even more. "I need you in the morning room," Ethan said. Lydia glanced past him toward Mercer, toward the security men now stationed too carefully near the exits, and something flickered low in her eyes. Now? Now. The morning room sat just off the main hall, smaller than the library, lined in pale blue silk panels and family portraits that looked softer under lamplight than they ever did in daylight. Mrs. Price was there already with Nia seated on a velvet settee, a cup of hot chocolate resting untouched in both small hands. The sight of her undid something inside Ethan all over again. The child looked tired now. Not fragile. Just tired in the honest way children looked when the night had asked too much of them. Lydia stepped inside and stopped when she saw Nia. Her brows drew together. "Who is this?" The question landed badly. Not cruelly, perhaps, but from the old blind place of people who spent their lives mistaking invisibility for insignificance. Ethan closed the door behind them. "This is Nia Brooks," he said. "She kept me from drinking the champagne tonight." Lydia gave a quick, confused laugh, waiting for the sentence to turn into something lighter than it was. It did not. Ethan nodded to Mercer. Mercer set the wrapped white tube, the cash receipt, the planner, and the handwritten note on the small inlaid table between the armchairs. One by one. Paper. Plastic. Handwriting. Evidence never needed theatrics when it had timing on its side. Lydia looked at the objects, then at Ethan. Her face changed by degrees, not collapse, not outrage, just a gradual draining of warmth, as each item rearranged the space inside her head. "What is this?" she asked quietly. Ethan did not sit. "You tell me." Lydia's gaze moved to the note. "After the wedding, everything transfers clean." Then to the planner page with the amended trust packet written in Claire's hand. Then to the pharmacy receipt under the false name. Finally to the unlabeled tube in Mercer's handkerchief. Her throat moved. "Where did you get those?" Ethan stared at her. "From Claire's room." Lydia closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, she did not look surprised. She looked caught. The room went very still. Nia lowered her eyes to the cup in her hands, not shrinking this time, just listening with the grave silence children use when adults are finally about to say what they have hidden too long. "Lydia," Ethan said, and her name came out rawer than he meant it to. "Tell me why Claire said your name." Lydia did not answer. She crossed slowly to the mantel and braced one hand against the marble as if the gesture were casual, though Ethan could see the whiteness rising at her knuckles. "Because Claire is trying to save herself," she said. "That is what people do when the room closes in." Ethan let that sit for a moment, but the lie had no weight. It did not even reach the floor. "Alan," he said without looking away from Lydia, "tell her what was in the champagne." Mercer spoke plainly. "A sedative compound. Low dose. Repeated exposure would impair judgment over time." Lydia inhaled and looked down. That was all. No denial. No demand for second testing. No shock. Ethan felt a hollow open under his ribs. "You knew," he said. Lydia pressed her lips together. In the hallway beyond the room, thunder rolled somewhere over the lake, distant but real. "I knew there was a plan to make you step back," she said at last. "I did not know every method." Ethan almost laughed again, but there was too much grief in the sound and nowhere safe to put it. "Step back. You have been running everything like a man who believes no one else can hold the map." Her voice shook only once, then steadied. "The board is tired, Ethan. The family office is tired. Harbor Crest is bleeding opportunities because you do not trust partnership unless you control every hinge and key. So you decided to fog my mind until control became negotiable?" Lydia looked at him then, really looked at him, and for one flicker of a second he saw not a conspirator, not a polished society woman, but the sister who had once sat beside him on the floor after their father died and promised they would protect the company from men who smiled too much. That memory made the present worse, not better. "I thought it would make you slow down," she whispered. "I thought Claire was exaggerating about what they were using. I thought it was supplements, sleep aids, things to take the edge off so you would sign the restructuring packet and let professionals redistribute authority. I did not think." She stopped. Ethan's voice dropped lower. "Did not think what?" Lydia's eyes filled, but she did not cry. "I did not think she would keep going after the vote in Greenwich. I did not think Roland would push for the trust amendments too. By then I was already in it. Too far in to expose it without destroying all of us." The room held that sentence like smoke. Nia looked up then, her small face calm in a way no child should have had to become. "You still let it happen," she said softly. Lydia turned toward her, startled, as if she had forgotten the little girl was even there. That forgetting told Ethan more than any confession could have. Nia sat with her hot chocolate cooling in her hands, shoes not quite touching the carpet, a child from the kitchen in the eyes of some, a witness in the eyes of truth, and she had spoken the cleanest sentence in the room. "You still let it happen." Lydia's gaze dropped. Ethan felt the sentence pass through the whole house. Through the portraits. Through the silk walls. through every polished family myth he had been raised to protect. And for the first time that night, he understood with complete terrible clarity that this was no longer about an engagement, or a board vote, or a single woman with a hidden bottle. It was about the people closest to him deciding his mind was a door they were entitled to open from the inside. For a long moment, nobody in the morning room moved. Rain brushed softly against the windows. The fire in the marble hearth had burned low enough that the logs no longer crackled, only glowed, red at the seams, breathing heat into the silence. Lydia kept her eyes lowered after Nia spoke, and Ethan understood then that truth did not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it came in a child's voice, clear and level, and left grown people with nothing elegant to hide behind. He looked at his sister, at the woman who had shared his last name all her life, and he realized something colder than betrayal. She had not only helped create the trap, she had kept smiling while he stood inside it. "How much was tonight about timing?" he asked. Lydia lifted her face slowly. Her mascara had not run. Her gown had not shifted. She still looked like a Whitmore in public. That was the awful part. Families like theirs trained composure so deeply it often survived conscience. "The trust amendment packet was supposed to be placed in your study after the cake," she said. Roland was going to arrive through the side entrance with revised language for the Harbor Crest consolidation. "You were expected to be tired, a little foggy, and ready to end the night. Claire said if you signed both packets close together, they could be routed before morning under emergency authority review." Ethan felt Dr. Mercer turn slightly beside him. Even he had not expected the machine to be that organized. "Emergency authority review," Mercer repeated. "On what grounds?" Lydia pressed her lips together. "Executive strain. Recommendation for temporary governance redistribution. Medical uncertainty if needed." Ethan's gaze snapped toward Mercer, then back to Lydia. "Medical uncertainty," he said. "You were going to use my own health against me." Lydia shook her head once, small and brittle. "I was told it would not get that far if you just signed." Ethan looked at the blue silk walls, at the portraits, at the polished brass lamp by the settee where Nia sat still holding the cup that had gone cold in her hands. This room had seen baby announcements, Christmas brunches, condolence calls, and investment victories. It had probably never seen honesty this expensive. "Bring Claire in," Ethan said. One of the security men at the door nodded and stepped out. Lydia closed her eyes. "Do not do this in front of everyone." Ethan turned to her. "You lost the right to choose the room." A minute later Claire entered under escort, still in ivory silk, still wearing the ring, though now it looked less like a promise and more like evidence. She took in the scene at once. Lydia by the mantel, pale and upright. Mercer with the collected items. Ethan standing. Nia on the settee beside Evelyn. Claire's eyes stopped there for half a second too long. Even now, Ethan thought she was measuring the child. Not with guilt. With consequence. "Sit," Ethan said. Claire remained standing. "I would rather not." "I know." He glanced at Mercer. "Tell her what Lydia confirmed." Mercer did not embellish. He laid it out in clean, professional terms. The sedative in the champagne. The hidden compound. The planner notes. The trust packet timing. The Greenwich vote. The medical angle. Claire listened without interrupting until Lydia's role was spoken plainly. Then she turned her head toward Ethan with a faint, tired disbelief. "So this is how you want it," she said. "An audience. A child. Your sister cornered into confession. Very noble." Ethan felt the insult move past him without landing. He had no soft tissue left for her to bruise. "What I wanted was the truth before I married it." Claire looked away first. Outside, thunder rolled farther off now, as if the storm had begun moving east across the lake. Guests still drifted somewhere beyond the closed door, hushed and uncertain, waiting for explanations elegant enough to survive in society. But Ethan no longer cared about elegance. He cared about sequence. He cared about names. He cared about what had been almost taken from him, and who had expected him to smile while it happened. "Roland Kessler is on his way here, is he not?" Claire said nothing. "Answer me." She exhaled slowly. "He was supposed to arrive after the cake." "And Harold Baines?" "Remote," she said. "He was advising from the city." Ethan nodded once. A strange calm had begun to settle over him now, not peace, but the cold order that sometimes came after shock had burned through the first layer of feeling. He had spent his life cleaning chaos out of balance sheets and negotiations. Tonight the chaos had worn a diamond and shared his table, but it was still chaos. Which meant it could still be answered. He turned to security. "No side entrance access. If Roland Kessler arrives, escort him to the West Conference Room and hold him there. No phone calls unmonitored. Harold Baines gets a call from my legal department in 10 minutes, not before." The guard nodded and left. Claire stared at Ethan as if seeing a man return to himself in real time. It was probably the first honest thing she had seen all night. Lydia sank slowly into one of the armchairs, the strength going out of her posture at last. "Ethan," she whispered. "Please." He looked at her, and the grief came back then, quieter than rage, heavier than it. "You knew enough," he said. "And you still let it happen." Lydia lowered her face into her hands. No one spoke. Then Ethan did something Claire clearly had not expected. He walked past both women and crossed the room toward Nia. The child's shoes were tucked close beneath the settee, and the hot chocolate in her hands had gone untouched because children sometimes forgot about comfort when adults filled the room with danger. He crouched carefully so his eyes were level with hers. Up close he could see how tired she was, how bravely she had been carrying that tiredness without asking anything from anyone. "You should never have had to do this," he said softly. Nia looked at him, serious as ever. "I just did not want you to drink it." Ethan nodded once. The simplicity of that sentence nearly undid him. No board agenda. No leverage. No inheritance map. Just a little black girl who had seen wrong and decided not to stay silent because silence would have been easier for everyone except the person being harmed. Mrs. Price touched the child's shoulder lightly. Ethan rose and turned back to the room. Claire was watching him now with something like comprehension finally breaking through her control. She understood, perhaps too late, that the night no longer belonged to power, or wealth, or proximity, or the careful manipulation of a tired man's trust. It belonged to the person everyone had overlooked. Ethan looked at the ring on Claire's hand, then at the evidence on the table, then at his sister folded inward in the armchair beneath their mother's portrait. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that everyone had to listen. "Tonight does not end with a wedding announcement," he said. "It ends with statements, arrests if they are warranted, and every document touched by this scheme frozen before dawn." Claire's mouth parted, but no answer came. There was nothing left to negotiate. In the hallway beyond the morning room, footsteps began to gather, legal counsel, head security, the first clean machinery of consequence arriving at last. And in the center of it all, beneath the soft lamp glow and the fading firelight, Nia Brooks sat very still with a cold cup in her hands, the smallest person in the house and the only one who had chosen decency before advantage. By 3 a.m, the house no longer felt like a place built for celebration. The candles in the ballroom had burned low into shallow pools of wax. Half-full glasses stood abandoned on mirrored trays. The cake remained untouched beneath its sugar flowers, beautiful and unnecessary. Rain still moved across the windows in thin silver lines, but the storm had passed its hardest edge, leaving behind the kind of quiet that made every footstep sound final. Roland Kessler had arrived through the side drive exactly as planned and had been met, not by a smiling host, but by legal counsel and security in the West Conference Room. Harold Baines, reached in the city just before midnight, had said too little, then too much, and by 1:15 his statements were already being logged. Claire had stopped speaking after the ring came off her hand. Lydia had spoken only once more, asking for time, the old family request for privacy dressed up as dignity. Ethan had given her neither cruelty nor comfort. Only process. Only consequence. Now the lawyers had moved downstairs, the guards had widened the perimeter, and the last of the guests had been quietly escorted to waiting cars under umbrellas and silence. The Whitmore estate, so practiced in hosting spectacle, had spent the night learning how truth looked when it refused to be managed. In the blue sitting room, the fire had burned to amber light and soft heat. Mrs. Price had finally convinced Nia to drink the hot chocolate after warming it again in the kitchen. The cup sat empty now on the side table beside a folded linen napkin and one untouched butter cookie. Nia had fallen asleep curled at one end of the settee sometime after 2, one small hand tucked beneath her cheek, her cardigan sleeve pulled over her wrist, her scuffed shoes still on because no one had wanted to wake her just to make her more comfortable. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside. He had removed his jacket hours ago. His tie was loose now, the top button of his shirt undone, the polished image of the billionaire worn down to the man underneath it. Mrs. Price rose quietly from the armchair near the hearth, but Ethan shook his head once. "Please," he whispered. "Sit." Evelyn looked at him for a moment, then nodded and lowered herself back into the chair. There was too much understanding in her eyes for him to bear for long. Ethan crossed the room and stood near the settee, looking down at the little girl who had changed the direction of his life with a whisper. In sleep, she looked younger than 9. Not because she was small, but because courage had finally let go of her face for a few hours, leaving only childhood behind. He noticed the blue ribbon in her braids, slightly frayed at one edge. The softened cuffs of her cardigan. The way her shoes had left faint rain-dark marks on the cream rug when she first came in from the hall. Details he might once have missed. Details that now felt more honest than every polished speech made in his house that night. "Her grandmother is resting in the staff suite," Mrs. Price said softly. "I told her the child was safe." Ethan nodded. His throat felt too tight for speech. On the side table beside the cold cookie lay the paper wristband from the catering entrance. Nia must have pulled it off in her sleep. He picked it up carefully between 2 fingers. Cheap paper. Faded ink. Proof that the house had only meant to let her in through the back. He set it down again as gently as if it were something sacred. After a moment, Nia stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, still clouded with sleep. When she saw Ethan standing there, she pushed herself up at once, blinking as if she had forgotten where she was. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Did I fall asleep?" Ethan did something he had not done all night. He smiled, small and real and tired. "You were supposed to," he said. Nia looked around the room, then back at him. "Are you okay?" The question was so simple it nearly broke him. Not "are they in trouble?" Not "did you find out?" Not "what happens now?" Just "are you okay?" Ethan lowered himself into a crouch beside the settee again so he would not have to answer from above her. "I will be," he said. "Because you spoke." Nia held his gaze with the same quiet steadiness she had shown him beside the champagne glass. But now there was a softness in it, too, the gentleness of a child who had done something hard without ever wanting credit for it. "I did not want anything bad to happen," she said. Ethan nodded once. "Something bad was already happening," he replied. "You stopped it." The fire gave a low shifting sigh behind them. Rain slipped down the window panes in slower lines now, no longer urgent. Somewhere in the house a door closed softly, and then the estate settled into the first honest silence it had known in months. Ethan reached into his pocket and drew out the engagement ring he had taken from the table after Claire removed it. For a second he held it in his palm, the diamond catching the last warm light from the lamp beside the settee. Then he placed it, not in a box, not on a finger, but on the mantel beside the cold ashes of the evening, where it looked suddenly like what it was, a bright thing emptied of meaning. Nia followed the motion with sleepy eyes. "Are you sad?" she asked. Ethan thought about the question. About Lydia in the armchair beneath their mother's portrait. About Claire in the morning room, finally silent. About Roland waiting with counsel. About all the rooms in his life where he had mistaken polish for goodness and proximity for loyalty. "Yes," he said honestly. But I would rather be sad with the truth than comfortable with a lie. Nia seemed to think about that. Then she nodded once, as if even at 9 she understood more than most adults in silk had understood downstairs. Mrs. Price rose and laid a blanket gently over the child's legs. Ethan stood, then looked back once more before leaving the room. Nia had already leaned into the pillow again, one hand curled over the edge of the blanket, the blue ribbon resting against her cheek in the lamplight. She was not rich. She was not powerful. She had entered the estate through the service entrance, and sat all night in rooms never designed for her. But before dawn, she had made everyone inside that house remember what decency felt like. And as Ethan stepped into the quiet hallway, with the storm fading and the first gray hint of morning gathering beyond the windows, he understood something that money had never been able to buy him. The people the world teaches itself not to see are often the ones who see the truth first.